different ways you can pull history into Easy Insight. First, you can upload CSV or Excel data from your previous system. So if you have data you've extracted out of your old inventory system, out of Sage, out of something else that you're using previously, if you just had spreadsheets you were using that you didn't have an actual inventory system, or you just have some general wholesale data that you need to pull in, that's one approach. Another approach is to pull in the data directly from whatever e-commerce platforms you were selling on. So if you started selling on Shopify in 2018 and started using your inventory system in 2024, you can load in that history from Shopify, from Amazon, whatever the e-commerce system is as well. So first, let's take a look at loading in the CSV data. So if we're loading in history from some old inventory system, we'll go to adding a connection. We'll choose Excel or CSV. We'll go ahead and grab our CSV file of sales history. We'll call this history, and then just to avoid messing with anything, we'll go ahead and add in the word history on each field name as well here. So we'll put that in on each one. As you can see, the data in this is pretty standard sales data. So you've got the customer, the document number, the order date, the quantity, the SKU, the sales rep, the tax, the total dollar value. We go ahead and do create data source. It'll take a second to process. After it's created that data, now we have the option of what to do with this file that we just uploaded. We're going to go ahead and say that it is historical data. We'll say that what history is what has our history. Now it's gone through and tried to guess for each column we've put in, is this the historical order date? Is this the customer? Is this the email? Is this the SKU? Some of these fields in this case we didn't populate, but we have a bunch there. We go ahead and hit save. So once we hit save, this is going to take a little bit. So while this runs, because it's going to probably take about 3 or 4 minutes, and instead of just looking at a loading screen, we'll go ahead and jump over to the loading in history from Shopify and Amazon. So I'm going to change over to sharing a different screen. So on this one, I've connected my inventory system, I've connected Amazon, and I've connected Shopify. Once you've loaded in your data from these different systems, you can go to the inventory section on your inventory data source, go to e-commerce historical orders, and hit add historical channel sales. That is going to automatically pull across that historical data into your inventory reporting. Now, how does this historical data show up in your reporting? For each of you, whatever you're using as your inventory system, when you go to create a report, there is a folder that is labeled as revenue and COGS details. This is what wraps up your sales reporting. The exact fields that show up here are going to be a little different depending on your IMS, but it's all going to work in generally the same way. And in particular, you're going to see a field here called current or historical order. So for clarity, if we go ahead and do a stacked column chart, and my laptop decided to randomly slow down on me, so I'm just going to shut a couple things down quickly. We go ahead and choose invoice date, or we'll choose order date as our x-axis. We will choose current or historical order, and we will choose total sales. So what's red is that's the historical data that we loaded in from Shopify and Amazon, and the blue is the current data in our current inventory system. So this all flows through so you can create reports looking at sales history, looking at product history, customer history, without losing that valuable data, having that feed through into this report, into your custom reports, into the pre-builts, into your forecasting, having that all come through so you have that history available to you. Now, as you dig into this more, you may have to make further customizations to what it's doing. So let's talk about what it's doing behind the scenes here. So, in particular, whenever you make that update, whether it's through the flat file or through the e-commerce, there is a report here called historical invoices. If we edit this report and we take a look at what the fields in this report are doing, you'll see that it's pulling over, in this case, the Shopify order number and the Amazon order number, or it's pulling over the Shopify SKU and the Amazon SKU. So it pulls those through. They're coming in off of external orders so that we have the necessary data here. So that's going to be feed through. And then if we look at, for example, under Amazon, there is a report here that it generated called external orders for Amazon Seller Central. If we look at this report, these are the fields that it's generating, and it's pulling those across to come through back into our inventory system. So it's whatever you do for the e-commerce one, it's going to create a report called external orders, and then that's going to be what has the fields that come through. So if there's something else that you need to pull in off your Amazon data and have come through back into that history as well, you can add it to this report and then pull it back through into historical invoices, and it'll feed through into revenue and COGS details in turn. So a little bit tricky as far as how that all ties together, but that's kind of the flow of what it's going to do. So if we go ahead and swap back to our other one. So if we go back here, this is our one that had we uploaded the CSV file. We have the same thing here, current and historical. We can do total sales. As you can see, if we look at the historical, here, our orders only started in a year ago, but if we go ahead and look back, then we're seeing all the way back to 2021. So this is a critical way to really get that history in, especially if it's a new inventory implementation, to help drive whatever it is you need to pull in. In the same way, so we have this as like the automated approach, but we definitely help customers as well where their historical data lived in their shipping platform. So maybe in ShipStation, or their historical data lived on an accounting system. So if you're pulling in enough QuickBooks, you can load that in as well. If it's a migration from QuickBooks Desktop to a more modern set of products, you can load in your history from QuickBooks Desktop and do the same sort of thing here to flow through. Any questions around any of that? And then if not, I'll kind of jump over just some things to watch for as you do this implementation. So a few things that just to pay attention to as you load in that history. You'll want to make sure that the SKUs match between the systems. If they don't, you'll need to set up some sort of SKU mapping, load that in as a file of its own, and update accordingly. Just because if the SKUs are something totally different back in what you had previously, then it's not going to match. So if you're trying to report based on product, that's just something to watch for. Same sort of thing with customer names. If your customer names are totally different from what you had previously to what you have now in your inventory system, they're also not going to match. So just something to watch for again there. So you really want to set up validation reports to make sure things match. So looking at your data, seeing, okay, for where it's historical, does it actually line up to the SKUs that we have in your inventory system now? So, just kind of track through that and make sure your data is matching and has integrity between the different pieces. And that's kind of the high level of it. any questions around any of that? If not, this may be a very short webinar, but everybody can get some time back. One more minute for any questions. All right, doesn't seem like we have any questions, so we'll go ahead and call it, but thank you for attending this webinar. We will have another webinar coming next week on Tuesday around setting goals in Easy Insight. That'll be the end of the webinars for the moment, but hopefully you've gotten some good information here and can help use this to, drive more value out of your reporting on your inventory data. Thank you.